Hello, hello, hello. Happy 2026. This is Will Radio Part 29, New Year's resolutions and plans. And the plans are subject to change or revision. This is episode 198 of Will's Guide. Today is January 3rd, 2026. Happy 2026. It's been a while since I've made a video. It's been a while since I made a Will Radio. I figured I would give a year, sort of end of year update as to some things that have been going on with me, and then talk about sort of some plans I have for 2026, sort of my ongoing never-ending experiments. So first of all, I moved. I'm back in South Carolina, living with the parents again after a number of years. So it's nice to be around them. I'm in the Charleston area and finally cleared out storage that I've had since at least going to grad school 20 years ago. The storage bill was just getting really obnoxious. So finally cleared that out. That's good. But I'm still settling in, partly because I had just a ton of boxes from stuff that had accumulated over 20 years, at least 20 years. I think I had, my guesstimate was something like 80 boxes full of books. If you know me well, you know I've got, I don't know if a book problem is the way to describe it, but I like books. I do have a t-shirt my mom got me that says, "It's not hoarding if it's books." So I try to remind myself of that. But at the same time, you know, when every single bookshelf is completely full and there's still 40 boxes of books left, it becomes a bit of an issue. So been giving away lots of books. So still have, I don't know, 20 or 30 boxes of books in the garage I have to keep going through. So, but it's also good because I'm reunited with books and interesting things, papers, mementos, notebooks, that I haven't seen sometimes in 20 years. No, that's fun. And also, I do have more space now than a little apartment in Boston area. And having more stuff around me, you know, like my telescope, room for electronics, experimentation, you know, those sorts of things mean I can do things that I wouldn't have been able to do before. Okay, so let's see. I still haven't been traveling a whole lot since the advent of COVID. When COVID started, at that time I was traveling a lot. I was going to Japan twice a year and going to Europe and all around the US. I've done very little traveling since that time. I've done a little bit, but not much. It's got its trade-offs. I enjoyed the travel. At the same time, it was pretty intense and costly in various ways. And, you know, it had this thing where it could be very inspiring. You know, maybe I would meet people and we have this great research idea or want to work on a project. But I was traveling enough where it's like, well, by the time I get back and catch up with everything work-wise and all that, catch up with everything socially, it was like time for another trip. You know, it wasn't like there was a lot of time for doing those projects when I was inspired. So that was part of an issue, but it was very inspiring. So probably I should probably do some more travel than I have been doing recently. But, you know, in the age of everything's like an online call, you know, I could do everything at home in a can order food in and stuff like that. It's like, I don't have to leave the house, but that also causes a problem. No, that's something I've thought about. So I didn't travel a whole lot in 2025. I'm not sure about 2026 yet. There are a few things I tried in 2025. Now in 2024, I tried this kilo tube experiment where I was going to make 1,024 videos and upload those. And I started part of the way into the year, which made it even harder. And so in effect, I had to make something like 4 videos a day on average. Some days I could do 3, but between 3 and 4 videos a day, every day, to make that. And the point of that wasn't just to rack up huge numbers of videos. It was to get me over what I'll call the Stanley Kubrick effect, where, filming someone walking through a door requires 70 or 80 takes. I was very much in that mindset, and I was so perfectionist and fearful of releasing something not perfect that even though I wanted to make videos, I didn't do them enough to develop my own style or to improve or whatever. I was making maybe 2 videos a year for programming venues or conferences or whatever. And each one was, I've got to make a video. And it was a week of me doing take after take after take and trying to figure out how to get the mics to work and deal with background noise and everything, fan noise, trying to do some editing. And doing it twice a year, it just wasn't enough for me to improve at it, and it became a very negative thing. I didn't look forward to making a video, even though some of the videos I thought turned out pretty well, but I didn't look forward to it. I would try to avoid it. And, it was a very stressful thing. I'd get super frustrated. And I had a microphone that, I had a condenser microphone that picked up all the background noise. And so many of my takes were ruined because a leaf blower or an airplane went by or a truck went by or whatever it was. And so I just decided, okay, I'm just going to make a lot of videos and I'll just have to learn, and then at some point I'll start figuring out my style. And so one of the things that came out of that was this Will Radio series, which I actually enjoy making, and I've missed making those. There were some issues. One was trying to make 3 or 4 a day was pretty intense. In some sense, that's good because, first of all, it got me over the self-censorship. It's like I just have to go for it. I can't do 80 takes if I'm going to make 4 videos a day. And it also forced me to be creative. Like, well, what am I going to make videos of? If I have to make 4 videos a day, what am I going to do? Will Radio came out of that. I was like, well, maybe I'll just talk, right? And then, but there were also some problems. One of the biggest problems was, when you're making videos or like even something like this Will Radio, audio is an issue, right? So in 2 ways. One is if your mic setup isn't right, then it's a problem in terms of just recording things. So my first mic setup wasn't very good. The arm holding the microphone was noisy and not strong enough and would keep flopping down. And, it was, the springs were really loud if you adjusted it. And, it just wasn't very good. And then, once again, I ended up with a microphone that was too sensitive. And also I think the mic cable wasn't good and I'd get static or it'd cut in and out and all that stuff was frustrating. So I made an investment to get a decent mic and a pretty good mic and a pretty good microphone stand. That was good, but it took me a long time to try to figure out what I should get. And then I had to learn how to use the software and all that stuff. So just that process took, probably several weeks to figure that out. And then I figured out eventually that even with my fancy microphone, I was getting all sorts of weird background noise. And it turned out that I had a lamp that had a bad wall wart that was generating electromagnetic interference. So whenever the lamp was turned on, you would hear like a crackling sound. So I had to get rid of it. It wasn't the lamp, it was the transformer unit that plugged into the wall. So stuff like that just took a long time to figure out. But the other part, in addition to figuring out the audio and the software and all that, was that you make noise when you're making a video like this, where you're talking, and that turned out to be a problem living in a small apartment with other people around. That just was an issue. Now my current situation, I think it's okay now. I think, if I'm not jumping up and down and shouting and stuff like that, I could pretty much make videos anytime. I believe that's true. So I am going to test that hypothesis. We'll see. Plan B is if it turns out that the making noise is an issue, there's another room where maybe I can go. It's not as convenient, but if I had to, I could probably set up in another room. That's part about having a house versus living in a tiny apartment. Is like, well, yeah, there's another room I can go to that has a door that's probably a quiet enough setup. It's not going to bother anyone. Anyway, so that was 2024, was the KiloTube video challenge. And I made a lot of wheel radios and all that. I didn't get anywhere close to making 1,024 videos, partly because of I can't make a video at 3 a.m. That's socially not going to work. So, and often 3 a.m. would be when I would have had time to have made a video. So like, I guess that's part of it, is if you're going to do something 1,024 times, you have to be pretty flexible about when you can do those things, or you better have a schedule that allows you to do it, at the same time every time. But my schedule is not like that. My schedule, is different every day. So, if I can't do it like, well, let me get 2 of these in before I go to sleep, and that might mean I have to do it at 3 a.m. If I can't do that, then there's a good chance I'm not going to do as many of those as I want. The other part of it is I found it intensely frustrating, if I was going to make a video and then it turned out like, turns out this is not a good time for me to make noise or whatever. So eventually I just stopped that. But of course I did get to the point where I was no longer, afraid to make a video. Now this video I'm making right now, this is the first time in months that I've made a video, and it was kind of awkward, getting everything set up and, trying to remember, okay, how do I make a video again? And I stumbled, and this is like my 3rd or 4th take, because I'm trying to make sure the AV stuff works and all that. But it's more like riding a bicycle at this point. I've made enough videos where it comes back quickly. So that was 2024, and I had this audacious goal, which was really about getting me unstuck from making videos. And from that standpoint, it worked. I didn't hit 1,024. As you can see, this is video 198. But it definitely worked in terms of getting me past, feeling I had to make something absolutely perfect and couldn't have any mistakes and whatever. And I've also, developed my own style. So that was cool. I consider that a success, even though I didn't hit 1,024. And then in January 2025, I decided I was going to try an experiment, because I people have described me to me as a generalist, uh, which I guess is probably pretty true. I mean, I am interested in things like mini Canron, obviously, but I'm also just like interested in lots of things, and I like to do lots of things. I'm not particularly good at really any of them, but at some point when you've had enough experience just doing enough things, that has kind of its own there's some sort of accumulative effect there. I don't know how to explain it. You just get lots of experience doing different things, and that has its own benefits. But anyway, that's sort of deeply tied in my personality. That was one reason PhD program for me was really hard, because I did 6 years largely of one thing, and there are people who are really good at that. Just doing one thing, focusing like a laser on one thing for years. It's like I can do that for a while, but then after a while, it's and I did focus very intensely on mini Canron for a long time, and I'm still interested in mini Canron. But the fact that I couldn't do anything else until that dissertation was done, or when writing a book, that was kind of the only thing to think about. That was really hard for me. So in January 2025, I did an experiment, and I said, okay, well, let me just try this, where I go like super generalist mode, and I just do everything. Okay. And I have this idea called the rotation, which is there are a lot of things I want to do, or I tell myself I want to do, or I tell other people that I do or want to do, or that I'm interested in. And, there are certainly going to be periods of time where I don't do those. Like, so for example, astronomy, am I an amateur astronomer? I don't know. Have I been interested in astronomy for my whole life? Yes. Do I have a nice telescope? Yes. Have I used it a lot? Yes, but mostly 25 years ago or more. So in any case, astronomy is something I'm interested in, but I haven't been active in actually doing things in amateur astronomy for a long time. Or I'm interested in ancient Egyptian, the culture of ancient Egypt, but especially the language and writing. So sometimes I get into that and sometimes I don't. So January 2025, I'm like, all right, I was in Boston area, small apartment, but what are the things I could do? And I tried doing something like, I can't even remember everything I was doing, but it was like I was trying to learn Sumerian, Akkadian, ancient Egyptian, Japanese, French, and German all at once. That was just the language component. And the human language, not the programming language component. I was doing all sorts of stuff, and I was drawing and what else? Making videos, writing, on and on and on. I was going to do all these things, and it was an interesting experiment. So basically, I had a giant list of things to do, and I'd try to get down, do as many of those as I could in one day, and then kind of carry over to the next day. And one of the effects of it was I was staying up late almost every day. I was staying up very late, trying to get everything done, whatever that meant. Another aspect was, I would often have like 5 minutes to spend on doing something or 10 minutes to do something. And writing definitely didn't get a lot of time. So that was writing. I felt stuck with writing, like writing a book, the same way I'd been stuck making videos. So I didn't get unstuck with the writing. I think there's a squirrel outside. I don't know if you could hear that. Anyway, that was an interesting experiment. It was very energizing in a way. Just in that, yeah, like I just didn't have time to sit there and watch YouTube videos all day or whatever it was, play video games all day. It's like I had every day like a list of things to do outside of work and family and friends that I had to get through if I wanted to sort of go through the rotation. Now, even if you don't know the result of that experiment, you could probably guess that trying to learn French, German, ancient Egyptian, Akkadian, Sumerian, and Japanese all simultaneously, even if that had been all I was trying to do, and it wasn't, that was only a fraction of what I was trying to do, it probably wasn't going to work out that well. And indeed, that it worked about as well as you expect, I might expect. So I just, by the end of January, or I don't even remember how long it lasted, but at some point it was like, okay, I can't. This is not something I can do. Partly because I wanted to make progress with writing, and that nothing was happening there. So I sort of discontinued that. It's like, no, I need to focus more on a few things. And I was still trying to do writing. I've been trying to, finish a book on my own for a long time. And I tried various things, some in 2024, some in 2025, where I tried to write books. Sometimes I tried writing in the open. Sometimes I tried to record videos of me writing, either with sound or without sound. And I ran into issues with, my wrists hurting and getting fancy keyboards and trying to, learn different key layouts and keyboards to keep my hands from hurting. It sort of went down this rabbit hole. And then eventually I stopped making videos of my writing because I just found it too distracting. In any case, I tried all these different things. And then at some point in 2025, I came up with this idea that I was going to get past, my writing block, especially with respect to books, by just writing and releasing a bunch of books in short time frames. So instead of saying, well, it'll take me a year to finish this book or 2 years or whatever. So the first edition of Reason Schemer took us 18 months. The second edition took us 13 years. Now, it wasn't like we were working on it full time for 13 years, but that just gives you some sort of sense, right? So in my mind, a book takes 18 months to 13 years probably, and that was a group effort. So who knows how long it really takes. And it's sort of like the Blizzard model of it's, we'll release it when it's done. But I've been working on and off for like 20 years trying to write a book myself and never released anything. It's like, well, that's not very fast. That's like infinite time to finish a book. So I thought, all right, well, let me do what I did with the videos, and I'll just force myself to write and release a bunch of books, and they're not going to be good. And if anything happens as good, then that's either accidental or that happens like later. But I'll write a bunch of books, and because the 2 editions of the book we have from MIT Press for Reason Schemer, that's the same book. I mean, it's been updated. The 2 editions are quite different, but still about the same topic, right? So, really written one book in the last 20 plus years. So I wanted to write a bunch of books. I was like, all right, I'll write 17 books. These will be my ShovelWare book collection. And I'll release one every 3 weeks, which seems like a pretty short period of time compared to 18 months or 13 years or 20 years. And the idea is that, first of all, just force me to, go through the mechanics, sort of like getting the microphone situation set up. Like I'll have to figure out like, well, I could sit there and play with the fonts all day, but eventually if I'm going to release something, I just have to go with it and make some choices and move on, right? So that was part of it. Another part was just to get me used to actually finishing things and releasing them. For some notion of finish, right? I mean, these could be really short books, but they are in some sense finished because I put them out there, and they're generally in a state where it's like readable. It's not like it stops mid sentence of the book, right? It's not like, oh, I started writing a paragraph and I just stopped, and then the book ends. It's like, no, I tried to clean it up at least enough where what's there is coherent, more or less. It's like, yeah, maybe a really short book, but it's at least a thing that makes sense. And then the other part, of course, was just getting over, my inner censor or, perfectionism or fear or whatever that, I'll release something and it's not perfect. And so part of it was I'd been thinking about this book called An Imperishable Wonderland of Infinite Fun, which I've talked about a lot. But it was very clear. It was like, well, I'm never going to release this book because it's way too precious to me. And I've built it up so much in my head that, there's no way it'd ever be in a shape where I'd feel I could release it. So that's no good, So I spent a lot of time daydreaming about this book and much less time actually writing about it. Or I'd spend all my time thinking about what the cover should look like and the cover art or whatever. But I wouldn't actually write the book at all. So I just wanted to get past that. And as to whether or not I ever write or release that book, in any case, I just want to get to the point where it's sort of like making videos where I can actually make and release things. And maybe whatever I release ends up being very, very different than what I had envisioned, but it gives me a chance to play around with style and try to figure out, well, if I write 17 books, maybe at least one of those books is something I want to, keep working on. So that was also part of it. It forces me to be creative and to play around with things. So that was something I did later in 2025. And to some extent it worked. And then to other extents, I wasn't real happy. So, probably in early November, I don't know, maybe it was October. I forget exactly when I started it. But it was like, well, great. I get to write these shovelware books. And there was one point in time where I was working on 3 books at once and trying to figure out what goes in them. And I figured out you could use like Apple Voice Memos. Now does like the AI transcription type thing. And it works well enough that you can get like a decent, first draft. So I got to the point where I would write on a notebook with my pen, kind of my notes, or I would, just type notes to myself on my phone. And then I would read from those notes into my computer or my phone, and then get that transcript, which would be pretty messy, but it was something I could then edit to just get some sort of first draft and also save my wrists a little bit. So that was something I figured out. And also there's like OpenAI has this Whisper app you could run locally, although of course now it's trying to get you to upsell, get you with the upsell or whatever. In any case, I played around with that kind of thing. I just found that my laptop in bed works fine for me doing editing. That's okay. I don't need any fancy keyboards. So I actually figured out like a basic format for things. And because I knew I had a series of these books, 17, I just had to make a bunch of executive decisions and started releasing them. So that part's good. However, I noticed that by the end of December, my attitude, or at least my behavior, had changed. Instead of being excited and working on 3 things at once and spending hours, writing notes to myself, it had become, oh yeah, I got a book due today. It's Sunday. It's due before I go to sleep. Let's see, it's 10 p.m. What do I want to write a book about, right? It was like me in high school, with a term paper assignment. The exact same thing. And so now the good thing, and it'd be like, oh, I don't want to do it. Maybe I'll just cancel, cancel the whole thing. Like for every single book, I sort of chickened out or almost chickened out at some point. Like I changed the topic or I threw out a draft and start again. I don't know. But I did finish every book and release them. Now, I'm not saying they're good and they're full of typos and they're not long and whatever. But I did release them, and I released all 5 of them so far, and all on time. None of them were late. But I had lost any sort of enthusiasm. Now, in some sense, that's good. Like my attitude wasn't, oh my gosh, people will realize I'm a fake if I release this book. It was like, oh, what a bother. Oh yeah, I guess I got a book due. All right, let me throw something together quickly, right? So in some sense, that's progress because it becomes sort of this mundane thing that was annoying. And so that actually is not bad. That's like a pretty reasonable attitude instead of like, oh, my precious, there's this greatest book ever written. And I was like, nah, yeah, I got a book due tonight. So that was good. But the part that was less good was I wasn't writing, right? So like, well, I released the book every 3 weeks and I gave myself 3 weeks because I thought, well, I'll be traveling or I'll have deadlines or whatever, and it'll really take me how can you write a book in 3 weeks? That sounds really hard. And then what I realized was, oh yeah, I could write a book. Like I could totally write a book in like 3 hours. That's not a problem. It's just the book's not going to be very good. But sometimes I would literally spend more time deciding, what do I want to write about than actually writing the book. And at some point, because I've done this a few times now, I had enough boilerplate for like the LaTeX and all that, where I could get a new book out quickly. Once I decided what I was going to write text-wise. So, that was also part of the point. But it wasn't like I was writing every day of those 3 weeks. It was like, no, I would write the last day, or maybe I'd start thinking about it the day before. And so that part was less good. So, that good or bad. I released 5 of these books so far of the 17 shovelware books. And yeah, you can find, let's see, here we go. Here's my GitHub repo, Weber/shovel books. And you can see there are 5 of them so far. Yeah. I'll let you explore the topics and whatever. Now, these are not good books. I'm not claiming they're good books. They are finished books in the sense that they've been released, okay? They're not finished books and that MIT Press is going to touch them or anything like that in their current form. But they're finished in that I have made them public and I'm saying, here's a book. I didn't say it's a good book. I didn't say it was, a book ready to be displayed in a bookstore or anything else. It is a book of some form. Yeah. So one question is this useless? From my standpoint, is it teaching me the wrong habits? I don't think it's useless because I'm actually doing stuff. It might be a terrible book, but at least I got it done and submitted it. Is it teaching me the wrong habit? Yes and no. I think it was teaching me the habit to release things, and not to chicken out. Ultimately I didn't chicken out. I did release all 5. So that's good. It taught me to make decisions like, well, I don't know, the book's due in 2 hours and I guess I better just decide on what the font is or whatever, that kind of thing. So, just forced me to make decisions instead of, changing my mind all the time. One habit I didn't like, as I already pointed out, was I actually wasn't writing a whole lot. I was writing some, but it wasn't like the sort of thing where, I'm going to write every day, or of the 3 weeks for each book, maybe I write for, 7 days out of the 3 weeks or something like that. It's like, no, I was writing for the most part for like a few hours. Yeah, that's not entirely true. There were a couple times I wrote, I spent more than that, where I really did spend a couple of days, trying to figure it out. But that's not the case for the latest book. So I was thinking about that. Do I want to discontinue and say, well, I'm past the being stuck phase, just like I did with the Kilo 2 video? But I think it's different. For the Kilo 2 video, I stopped that not because I didn't want to do it anymore. I stopped it because, logistically, it just was too hard for me to continue doing, and I just got super frustrated. That's not the case here. I mean, I fully intend to continue making those books and releasing all 17. So there's no reason for me to stop it. And the fact that I'm not writing as much, well, I think the issue there is, I'm just being kind of lazy. I'm being kind of lazy. There's a forcing function every 3 weeks. So I can be lazy up until that last day, and then I just release it, and I'm at the point where it's like, yeah, I'm not embarrassed anymore. Maybe it's embarrassed by the first or the second book, and I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, this is what it is, right? So I was thinking maybe what I really need to think about is, yeah, I'll just do the 17 books once every 3 weeks, like I promised myself. However, I'm also going to do something else, which is to say, well, I've never written anything that turned out well on the first draft. Usually it takes 4 or 5 drafts before something turns out the way I really like it. So how about I look at this more like a gardening type of exercise? I've released something. I'm saying this is the first edition of the book. Well, what if I, did multiple editions? Now, I had thought about, maybe I'll release 1,024 books, this year, or maybe 365 books. I thought about all sorts of variants. So I'm going to do something a little bit like that, but they're not going to be 365 or 1,024 new books because, I don't need more than 17, really bad, incomplete books. That's not necessary. I think 5 of those is sufficient, actually. However, if I think about the forcing function, well, what if I were to release 365 editions of books this year? And so an edition is either a new book, first edition of a new book, one of the 17, or it's a revised version of one of the books I've already released. And I'd already talked about this when I first started this approach to writing these shovelware books, that I might want to do revisions. I held off for a long time, partly because I was afraid I would just end up doing revisions and just revise like one book and count that or something instead of making multiple books. So I wanted to get further into the 17 books, but after doing 5 books, I think it's okay. And the idea of trying to release 365 editions of books means that I have this forcing function. If I take that seriously and try to do it, which I want to, then, this is going to force me to write and to update things and to release them and get into, this kind of nothing precious, work a day type thing where it's like, yep, it's a new morning. I've got another book due. Now, I didn't say 365 days I would release a new book. I said 365 editions during the year 2026. This is an important distinction because I also know there are times I'm going to be traveling, I'm sick, or there are work deadlines or any number of other things where I'm just not going to do it that day probably. But I could do, maybe 2 editions a different day. And from that standpoint, I can only do 1 edition for, I can only, I can do at most one edition for one book in one day. That's my rule. So, if I've got books 1 through 5 currently that I've released. So if I wanted to do 2 editions in one day, I can't do 2 editions of book 5, for example. No, I can do 1 edition of book 5 and 1 edition of book 2 or whatever. I could make a whole bunch of edits to one of those books. That's 1 edition. Okay, it doesn't matter how much. And at the same time, adding 1 word could be, the edit for a new edition, or changing a word or whatever. That's enough to be an edit, resulting in a new edition. Now, I'd like to do more than that, okay, but that would count. So, like gardening. These are gardening, these books. And sort of like when I'm releasing one of these shovelware books, I think of it right now as more like I'm planting a stake in the ground. It's like, oh yeah, this is an area I want to tend to, and we'll see. Part of it's just based on how interested I am in that book or that topic, how many editions it's going to get, how much editing it gets, or extension. And so now I'm thinking in terms of less so much what are the books I want to write, and more what are the books I want to edit or revise. So I can release a book on any topic, the shovelware book. The question is, do I want to revise that book 100 times or 20 times? I don't know. If I'm not at all interested in revising it, I could still do it if I think it's like a one-shot deal and I could just knock it out and be done with it. But probably more likely I'm going to be interested in books that I want to edit for a while. Yeah. So anyway, that's the shovelware book situation. Another thing that sort of went along with that was between the move and, the small apartment and trying to concentrate on the shovelware books, I basically stopped making videos. So I want to start making videos. I'm not sure on which time scale I want to. Like how many videos. I'm not going to try to make 1024 this year. But, I don't want to go months without making videos. I'd like to make videos more often. I had started a series on like research and research thinking and teach, I'd also done one on scheme, reading the scheme report. I had started a few series and I'm going to rethink those. Do I want to continue those? Do I want to restart any of them? Do I want to do something a little more organized where I kind of know what the end is and say, okay, this is going to be 20 episodes, or maybe I even record the whole thing and release it at once. I don't know. I am thinking a little bit about that. So I've got some ideas of things I might do. Okay, getting unstuck progress. Well, I'm on lots of things. Japanese. I feel like I got a little stuck and then stopped on remembering the kanji. Mini Canron hasn't been getting as much attention as I'd like. Have made some progress with colleagues last year, so hopefully this year we'll make some more progress in that. Writing, well, finishing books for some notion of, or at least releasing books. I shouldn't say finish, releasing books. Yeah, I definitely made some progress there, getting unstuck. So I think that's cool. And instead of thinking, once I'm done these 17 shovelware books, I'll write a book I care about, I'm thinking more in terms of, well, how about if one or more of the shovelware books actually is something I care about, and then I'll just do these micro editions and just kind of grow the book that way. And, by the time I've done 100 editions of the book, maybe it actually is worth reading. So that's cool. See how that works. Making videos. Yeah, I kind of got stuck, I feel. I had a series or two that seemed to not make progress. Part of that was difficulty of making videos. I found that if I went a long time with between videos, it was really hard. It's like, what was I talking about last time? I had to go back and watch the videos. And so maybe something a little more organized and something more intensive in terms of making videos every day for a while on a topic, or every other day, or so somehow finishing a series on a topic. That could be interesting. As far as this tension between concentrating on one thing versus doing lots of things, I'm leaning right now towards doing more things. One of the things I found is, I'm not good at austerity, I guess, in terms of, doing stuff. So if I'm taking like an intense summer school on some topic and it's like 16 hours a day and I'm living there and I'm surrounded by a bunch of people and there's lots of energy, yeah, great. I can do that like super intensely, at least for a few weeks. But like what I found with the shovelware books is not doing other stuff and stopping other hobbies and not making videos and stuff like that ultimately didn't make me write a whole lot. I ended up releasing the books, and maybe I did have to stop other things in order to clear space for those first few books to come out. But at this point, like I was doing the Sunday night, last minute thing. And what I found was, what replaced, writing or work or my other hobbies or activities. Yeah, it's like watching YouTube or whatever. It wasn't anything, playing Angband or it wasn't anything to get too excited about. So I don't particularly like that. I'd rather be more active doing things. So I'm going to do something, not as extreme as what I did last January, but I'm doing a lot right now. And I'm adjusting it. I'm not trying to be super doctrinaire. So I'll tell you in a minute what my current plan and New Year's resolution is, and what I'm doing right now. It's a fair number of things, but it's not like it was like a year ago. So, I'm giving preference to lots of things, but I've also decided the requiring I've come to the conclusion that I need a little flexibility in kind of the rules of exactly how I'm doing things in order to inspire creativity and to make it enjoyable and stimulating, and to make sure that I'm not just like checking a box where it's like, okay, I spent 1 minute, scribbling a drawing, so that check that box. So, something a little more than that, where I'm actually making progress, or getting better, or exploring things I'm interested in, whatever, having fun. It has to be a certain level of intensity. Yeah. Moving, storage, books, DVDs, CDs, all that stuff. I've got a setup now where the desk I'm making this video at, I've got a bunch of my electronic stuff. I also have another desk, like a table behind me for retrocomputing stuff that has a Commodore 64 and a Dreamcast. And then on a big chest of drawers, I've got a 20-inch Sony BVM. What is it? 20 F1U, I think, is the model of the broadcast video monitor. It only does standard def, and it weighs a ton. It's got a rack mount built into it with the different video cards. It's completely ridiculous. It's got 900 lines of resolution, but it's still only 240p or 480i. So I got a cable from, was it like, I forget the name. retro gaming cables, RGB or something from the UK. I got a few cables, and I've hooked up the Dreamcast, and some of the Dreamcast games work on it. And so finally got that working. I've been lugging that giant giant monitor. It just weighs a ton. I've been dragging that around the country for years. Never got it working. Finally got that working. That was cool. Playing around with the Commodore 64 again, so doing retro stuff. Finally found my ham radio and storage. Playing around with that a little bit. Yeah. Like to play with my telescopes, get into astronomy again. So this has just been fun, getting back into that some. Yeah, some of these things are areas or hobbies or activities, areas of interest I haven't done for a while, partly due to lack of space or not having these things nearby. One thing I will say is a lot of the books I've gotten away or rid of, it'd be like, oh, I have 3 copies of this book. It's like, how did that happen? Pretty easily. One was in storage. One was my parents' house. And then, I'd be working somewhere or living somewhere else. And then I got a copy of it, right? So, my rule was if I had 3 copies of a book, I had to give away at least one. Not necessarily 2, but at least 1. Okay, so New Year's resolutions and plan. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. This is the sort of thing I love spending time thinking about. Okay, so here is from January 1st. These are my notes. Now, one of my things was I was going to start using my fancy Strathmore 500 series natural, like natural white or cream colored 24-pound weight 100% cotton paper with my fountain pen with ink with the platinum carbon black ink. So this is my 3,000 year or 5,000 year notebook idea. So the sort of thing where it's like, yeah, you buried this in the desert in Egypt, a couple thousand years later, there'd be a chance it would survive. So just like really high quality paper and ink that should be light fast and is water resistant, all this stuff. So I started using this paper again. That was like kind of one of my resolutions. And let's see, I have a list of daily activities. Okay, so here's how it started. Exercise every day. All right. What does that mean? So I've intentionally left some of these kind of fuzzy. It's like, well, I'll figure it out. If I exercise every day, I'll figure it out. That's part of my philosophy of doing things a lot, is like, I'll figure it out if I do it a lot. If I'm thinking about a lot, I'm doing it a lot, eventually something will come out of it. So exercise every day. I don't know what that means. Like I said, this is every day. This isn't 365 times a year. This is every day. So exercise. Take care of my teeth, floss and brush and all that stuff. Just be good with that. Listen to Shabayan music to get me pumped up. And here's a note to myself. There have been times where I was working in a coffee shop or a restaurant, like, sometimes late at night, and I'd be working, hacking Mini Kenrin or whatever it was, and I'd be listening to music, and people would come up to me and they were like, "What are you listening to?" I was listening with headphones, right? But I was so into it that like people would stop by and they wanted to know what I was listening to. So, music like that. So I like Shabayan Toho electronica music a lot, immensely. But I've relaxed that one. Okay, so that one is like, well, I just want to listen to music that alters my mood every day. That's like a standing order to myself. There's one. Read from a physical book. My vision has never been great. It's gotten worse over time. It's gotten significantly worse in the last 6 years. one of the things that's a little ironic is now I'm finally reunited with all these books, just flowing all over the place, boxes of books still in the garage that I haven't opened yet because there's no space for them. All the bookcases full and overflowing. So I've got physical books all over the place. At the same time, it's like harder than ever for me to actually read a book. It's got to be, the light's got to be exactly right and at the right angle and all this stuff. But I still can read physical books. It's easier for me to read on an iPhone or an iPad, especially if it's like in a dark room and it's like, just like the backlit. That's much easier for me. So I have read a lot of, books on screens, but I want to keep reading physical books. That's one of my things to do every day is read a physical book. Right now I'm reading Double Star by Robert Heinlein. And if I get the light exactly right, it's fine. That's a weird book, by the way, in that I know I've started that book a bunch of times. I don't know if I've ever finished it. We're like, hey, I know I've read this before. It's like, what's going on here? So, well, as I keep reading, I'll see if I ever actually finish that book. But anyway, that just happened to be a book close by when I wanted to start reading physical book. So that's one of my daily things. Keep up my Hobonichi. I think that's what you call it. Hobonichi Techo. My brother got me this. It's like a Japanese yearly planner / diary, like day by day type thing. It's actually pretty cool. I knew these things existed. I was never going to get one myself. But now that I have one, I quite like it. And it has very nice paper. It has the Tomoe River paper, which I've bought myself and bought notebooks for fountain pens. So it's really good paper for fountain pens. And so, here, this is getting into this theme of, I don't want to be too doctrinaire about any of these things. I was going to say, okay, I'm only going to use my super fancy paper, the Strathmore 500 series paper, for writing all my notes. And instead of having notebooks all over the place, which I have, I've got so many notebooks. You wouldn't believe how many notebooks I have, every size and style, and boxes full of notebooks from 20 years ago, just like a zillion of them. Instead of that, it's like, I'm going to have this one perfect notebook, right? And everything is going to last 3,000 or 5,000 years. So it's like, well, what do I do with this other notebook, which I'm starting to make use of, and it's actually fun to write in. But that's got decent paper. It's like, well, this is the sort of paper that I would buy as high quality paper, and it's great for fountain pens. So there's like nothing wrong with it. So right now I'm writing notes in both my fancy paper, super fancy paper, and then in this planner, or I don't know what you call it, Hobonichi. Yeah. And so the Hobonichi also has in the front this like these columns where for each month you can write your own columns down, and then you can like do a check mark or a number or something. So I've been writing down the different activities, not these like daily activities, but the 365 activities, which I'll talk about in a minute. So anyway, so keep that up to date. That's a daily activity. Anyway, those are daily activities. And then I have these other types of activities, which I'm calling the 365 count for 2026. That means I want to, for each of these, have done that thing 365 times. I'm not saying it has to be done every day. As I was saying before, it's like, some of these are just too hard to do. Read from a physical book every day. I should be able to do that. Doesn't matter if I'm traveling or have a deadline. I can spend 10 minutes, with a paperback or whatever. So here's the 365 count activities that I started with. One is, number one, release 365 micro editions, or like the Greek mu symbol editions, of my books. And I released a version of book 5, micro edition that day. Yeah, so that's what I was talking about before, trying to garden these books. Release, okay, so here's something I wrote down originally. Release 365 videos. And, the first 2 days of January, I didn't make any videos. Now, part of it was, I was still negotiating or figuring out the making noise issue and all that. That's part of it. But as far as releasing 365 videos, and I also had thought about 1024 for these numbers, by the way. I think that's maybe too strict. So it is true that I didn't release videos the past 2 days. However, I did outline. I did write down. I thought about and I wrote down what I wanted to do for this video, this Will Radio, both January 1st and January 2nd. And I decided in hindsight that that actually counts. Planning things out, or if I wanted to make video that required editing, if I spent the day editing it, or part of the day editing it, I think that counts, right? So this is me sort of changing the rules a little bit. I think it's also more fun and leads to more creativity when the rules are a little looser. Number 3, do electronics 365 times. Okay, so do is in quotes. So what does that mean? Do electronics. Well, that could mean I build a circuit. I could test a circuit. I could, hook up a signal generator and oscilloscope and characterize a circuit, or, design a circuit, any of those sorts of things. And also, what is electronics? So one of the things I've decided, and this is where the creativity comes in, and being less doctrinaire maybe than the first time I tried this a year ago, was, I've got this ham radio that I haven't used in years, and I never really learned how to use that handheld handy talkie HT or whatever you want to call it. It's a Yaesu, was it VX8? It's a nice radio, and it's got a zillion features. So it's that's electronics. One of the things I'd like to do is get into radio electronics and RF circuits and all that. That's a whole different world that I've done almost nothing with. And I have a ham license. So it'd be fun to build some radios or build a radio kit, or, start playing around with AC circuits, start playing around with RF circuits, all that, and do a lot of analog instead of digital electronics. So I decided, part of it was, once again, there's the creativity is my desk is 2 a.m. My desk is full of junk. So I'm not going to go to the workbench and, move all this stuff off of it at 2 a.m. I mean, I could do it, but I probably wasn't going to. So it's but I have the ham radio. Well, that's related to electronics, so I'll play with that. So I've been learning how to use that radio, and there's some YouTube videos on it. I've been looking at the manual, and yesterday I looked up in Charleston area, where are the repeaters, that type of thing, tuning into repeaters, and haven't pressed the push to talk yet, but haven't keyed up yet, but I, just starting to get used to that radio. I haven't used in years. So that counts to me as doing electronics. Okay, here's another one which I ended up relaxing. Number 4, play against a human in StarCraft 365 times. Originally it was going to be StarCraft Remastered, Brood War, StarCraft 1. And then it's that's going to be kind of hard, because even though I want to get more into StarCraft Brood War, I'm terrible at that game, but I would like to play it. One of the issues is, unlike StarCraft 2, you can't just ladder and find opponents easily. There is a type of ladder, but at least in the US, it's depending on your rank, you might be queuing for a long period of time. So like you wait for 10 minutes for a game and the person like immediately quits or something. So I got pretty annoyed with that. Now there is a Discord server, there's a sign called CPL, Coach Pupil League, has a Discord server, and there are different ways to get to know people and set up games. And if you have a practice partner or someone who likes to play a game, that's one thing. But I thought, well, this is just going to be frustrating. So I said, well, instead of StarCraft Brood War or Remastered, I'll say it could be just StarCraft 1 or 2. I guess it could be StarCraft 64 for N64, but I'm not that much of a glutton for punishment. And so I've relaxed this because I have friends who like playing other RTS games like Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. So I installed that yesterday. So now it's not play against a human in StarCraft. It is do something related to real-time strategy games. And now that also opens it up to things like the retro gaming, because there's a game from Broderbund called The Ancient Art of War, which is sort of a proto real-time strategy game that I enjoyed a lot on the classic Mac. I played that on the Mac SE. I would like to play that again. I played it on an emulator. It's just not the same. So that's more interesting to me. It's like, well, now I can play against friends in AOE, maybe tie it to retrocomputing. That's another thing. It's like trying, how are these things related? Maybe I can tie these things together more. Here's another one. Number 5, play a musical instrument 365 times, especially guitar, keyboards, drums, singing. Okay, my voice is an instrument. I want to get into music a lot more this year and making stuff. As far as recording and all that, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to be playing instruments. I've got guitars. In fact, I just made a guitar pedal for my brother from a kit from StuMac. Actually pretty cool. I liked it. That's a tie-in with electronics. So I like to start getting into guitar pedals, maybe designing my own guitar pedals at some point. Number 6, write and record 365 songs. That's pretty ambitious. It feels like to me. Now, once again, what does that mean? Okay, so I can be a little loosey-goosey about it. So the first time on January 1st, late at night, I'm like, well, what does that mean? How do I do this? So I just started, I think on my phone, I had voice memos, and I just sang, a few words into it. It's like, all right, well, there you go. Technically, I wrote and recorded a song. That's fine. But I'm also just going to change this. So do something related to a song. Making a song 365 times. So that could be recording a song, could be writing some lyrics. Last night I just wrote some lyrics. Just 2 lines, but doing something, so just trying to keep it fresh and, loosey-goosey enough I can be creative. Number 7, do retrocomputing or retro gaming 365 times. And then here I also over time decided to make it a little looser. So it was like, well, does that mean Commodore 64? Does it mean Power Mac 7166? Does it mean Dreamcast, Atari 2600 or VCS or something else? One thing is that I used to really be into tabletop role-playing games in the 80s and other games, sort of like related games, Steve Jackson games, all that sort of thing. And I am recently reunited with a bunch of these old games that I've had in some cases since the early 80s. I don't think I have anything from the 70s. Maybe I have a little bit, but not much. But it's mostly 80s stuff. And so, a lot of it's not in great shape. They're not like collector's items, the shape they're in. They're like heavily used for the most part. But, they're part of my history, and I still keep touch with my friends I play those with. So I thought, maybe I extend my notion of retro computing or retro gaming. If you think of it, retro gaming is included. Well, maybe I include like analog version. So not analog in terms of analog television or something like that, but I mean in terms of tabletop role-playing games, or some of the board games that I had from the 80s. So yeah, I grabbed my old Star Frontiers and was looking through that and some of the supplements and looking at the maps and stuff, and maybe do some of that gaming with my friends. We did this 40 years ago. Number 8, do Japanese language 365 times. I was going to put like remembering the kanji or the Pimsleur course or something, but once again, I think I want to be looser. So what I did was I just looked at some of my collections of manga, and there was Working, which is, I know from the anime, which I really like the anime, but it started as a manga. It's like a 4-panel gag manga, I think. So I just grabbed the first volume of that, and just tried to read it. It's like, oh yeah, my kana, my reading of kana is really, really bad. So maybe I can work on that a little bit, reading it in context, and then start working on the kanji again. Or maybe I go back and look at the anime and look at the manga. I don't know, but just something where I'm getting back into the language. The most fun I had in learning Japanese was actually when I was in Japan and I was on the subway, and I would be trying to just like understand little things. Like I'd read the kanji for one of the stations, and I'd listen to, the English voice telling you what the station was. I was just trying to notice patterns and stuff like that. So, trying to learn Japanese in a way that's fun and stimulating, and instead of just purely rote memorization. Although I'm not opposed to rote memorization for things like kanji, but it'd be more fun if I did remembering the kanji and every day, looking at this manga or whatever, try to recognize the things I'm learning. Number 9, talk with, write to, or visit a remote family member or friend 365 times. I've modified this one a little bit. So reach out to, or contacting via email or Signal or Slack, or however, I don't care. Doesn't have to be writing a letter. Doesn't have to be a video call, but maybe it turns into one of those things. But just trying to reach out and be a little more social and keep up with people. Number 10, write scheme or mini Canron code 365 times. Just like the writing sort of, like I want to write, or say I want to write, and then it's like, I start writing at 10 p.m. on the Sunday when the books due. It's like, well, scheme and mini Canron. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, they know me from mini Canron or maybe scheme. It's like, it's very easy for me to not do anything with scheme or mini Canron for a while. Not because I'm not interested in those, but just because like maybe I'll work on planning scheme workshop with other people, but that's different from actually writing scheme code, right? It's like last year I put a lot of effort with like, mini Canron workshop. Probably put in more effort with the mini Canron workshop than like writing mini Canron code. So I want to, try to get me back into that. Now, last year, last year, I think it was last year, I was doing this thing where I was recording, or I was maybe like posting. I don't remember. At some point, I was like recording videos of myself doing a little mini Canron hacking or whatever. But I don't know. I wasn't doing it intensely enough to get anywhere. So instead of write scheme or mini Canron code, I should probably say do scheme or mini Canron. So that could be including planning or daydreaming or thinking like, is there an app kind of like Barlaman that would be cool to write, or, so write scheme or mini Canron code, I think isn't right. That's one of the things I think I've learned is you want to, if you're trying to do this sort of thing, it probably helps to be a little more flexible and loosey-goosey. So you're not just, checking off boxes, but you're actually allowing some creativity to come in unexpected things. 11, create 365 drawings / paintings. Once again, probably do drawing or painting. It might be better. Like, I've got some books. I've got like Leonardo's notebooks, or there's a really cool book I've got on silver point drawings. So, doing drawing for me might be getting one of those books and just studying it and trying to figure out like, oh, this would be a cool drawing to copy, or this style looks really interesting. Maybe I can try something in that style. I think that is that's better than just saying, yeah, I got to do a doodle to check it off or whatever. Yeah, I think that's enough. I have some other notes here, but that's enough. So anyway, that's the plan and the New Year's resolutions, basically. And then updating the plan, as I said, like, okay, so one of the things I think didn't work last January was it wasn't just I tried doing so many things. Obviously, at some point that was, when I tried learning 5 languages at once plus everything else, that was just too much. But there was another part which was too much, which I think just became too inflexible, where, like I said, I ended up sort of checking off boxes or doing something for 5 minutes so I could check off the box. That wasn't really useful ultimately. So instead, I'm going to give myself permission to sort of adjust things as they go. And I've already pointed out a few times where I adjusted and have some notion of doing something in that area as opposed to I will create a drawing every day or whatever. It's like, well, I'll do something related to drawing or painting. And I've got some sense of what it means to do that. I can think about it and I can expand that notion of what it means to do it. Or like the ham radio with electronics. Like, originally it was, I'm going to build a circuit, I was going to build 365 circuits or design 365 circuits or whatever. But by being more flexible, I was like, well, my desk is messy, but there's a ham radio here that I haven't used. So maybe I mess around with that. And the ham radio stuff obviously is connected to electronics. So, maybe that leads to me building a radio or something. I don't know. But in any case, I think not just doing fewer things, but being much more open as to what it means to do something, I think is interesting. So that's what I'm trying to do. How well has it worked so far? So I've only, this is only my 3rd day. My January 1st, I stayed up till 5:30 a.m. doing stuff. I didn't get started until pretty late. I was doing other stuff during the day. But it took me until around 5:30 to do, in some sense, most of what I was talking about. So let's see. January 1st, I did everything except I didn't play any RTS. I didn't play any StarCraft or do anything with RTS. And then yesterday, I ended up staying up till 6 a.m. doing stuff. I didn't do any mini Canron or Scheme. I was like, yeah, I could, but at that point I was so tired. It was almost 6 a.m. I was like, yeah, I'll just go sleep. And I decided, like, I had zeros, goose eggs for the video for both of those days. And then eventually I was like, I should just relax it to do something related to making videos. And then because I'd been preparing the last 2 days, I don't know if you could tell, but actually I've thought about this quite a bit. What I wanted to say, I said, well, I'll give myself credit because I actually was preparing for the videos. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying. I'm hoping I can, sort of do it in a way where I don't have to stay up till 6 a.m. every day. I don't think that's sustainable. And who knows, maybe 365 is too much. Maybe it's 180 or something. Maybe that's sustainable. And so maybe I'll have to, as part of updating the plan, probably by the end of January, I'll have some sense of what this looks like in practice. I will say one reason I was willing to try this sort of experiment again was there were a couple times where I was just like, watch some YouTube or whatever, play some Ang Band. And it's like, okay. Seems like it didn't really make progress on some of the, or there's this Sony BVM monitor staring at me that I've been lugging around for years and I hadn't gotten to work. And that was a big one for me. It's like I'd ordered these expensive cables from the UK and all that, and I'd had trouble getting the TV hooked up properly. It's like, it's so complicated. And I thought, instead of going to sleep, I know it's kind of late. I don't know. It wasn't that late. It's 11 o'clock at night or something. But I was like, let me just try one more time getting the TV to work. And I got it to work. I actually got it one more time. It had been kind of frustrating, but I finally figured it out. And I got a picture, and it required a little bit of luck because it turns out that not all the Dreamcast games, are in standard def, and I was just letting the Dreamcast play. And so if I had a Dreamcast game, other than the startup screen, but once you're past that, if I had a Dreamcast game that was in 480p or whatever it was, then it wasn't going to display on my monitor, at least properly. But that wasn't the real issue. The real issue is like there's that rack mount in the back, and I had the wrong video card selected on the rack mount. I had to go through and read the manual yet another time to finally say, oh, there's this setting. I didn't realize what that did. So anyway, I got that working late at night. And then there was another thing I was trying to do, which was there was this test pattern, 240p test pattern for lots of consoles. That's free software or whatever. And I wanted to try it out just to see that it had something that really was 240p on this monitor that only does standard def. So I had to figure out how to burn a CD for the Dreamcast. And part of it was I had this old Apple Super Drive. It turns out like the latest Apple operating system doesn't even, like, half the software doesn't even work anymore with the DVD stuff or the CDs or the Super Drive stuff. I guess Apple's just not maintaining that anymore in the same way. So anyway, I had to recreate or read a zillion blog posts and that type of thing about how do you burn a CD for the Dreamcast with this test pattern. And required me to get a stack of, writable CDs. And, I think I tried between 8 and 11. I burned between 8 and 11 of these before I finally got one working correctly. It was like quite tricky. And that was after a couple of days of looking into it, trying to figure out the software, which software still ran. And a lot of it's like, here's software from 10 years ago. It was that kind of thing. I eventually figured it out. And once again, it's the same thing where I tried it a bunch of times and got frustrated. And then I was about to go to sleep. Like, let me just try one more time. And I got it working. So I was like, that kind of one more time spirit. And I'm willing to stay up a little late to try to make progress on this thing. So now I've got this working giant Sony BVM monitor, the greatest standard def monitor ever made in terms of that size factor. Got that working, got the 240p test pattern working on the Dreamcast, got a bunch of Dreamcast games, hooked up the audio, just stuff like that. And a lot of it was just finicky. One of the things of retrocomputing, I saw this in one of the YouTube videos someone was talking about, is that in retrocomputing, often the journey is the important part, not the destination. And I think that's true. Like, I've just learned a whole lot about how these systems work, and it's just kind of fun to do that sort of problem solving. But now I've got working systems. Now onto the Commodore 64, and then maybe my 7166. And I definitely do feel like I want a compact Mac, maybe a SE30. I had an SE, but I've never had an SE30. I think that would be cool. Well, space is an issue, but anyway, I took naps the last 2 days because I was pretty tired, but it was, worth it to me to stay up a bit late to do these things I care about and I'm interested in. I think I'll probably figure out ways to do these things, or I will adjust my plan so I don't have to stay up till 6 a.m. doing them. But to some extent, if I would, I guess I'd put it this way. My mental state, I think, is better if I stay up late doing things I care about than if I get plenty of sleep, but I spent the day just, watching random videos and, playing random video games or watching random TV shows or whatever it was. Right. So that's just, for me, I think I like doing things that are involved with topics I'm interested in, and I'm interested in pretty much everything. So, see how this works. But so far it's been, I'm on day 3. We'll see. I haven't done those things. I still have this list of things to work on. Haven't really done any of them today. But, I'll get cracking. Let's see. It's 10:08 p.m. So certainly I can do some of these things. And hopefully I can do them before 6 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. But if I stay up till late, that's fine. It's tomorrow's Sunday. I don't mind staying up late. Okay, well, that's a quick update. I mean, not quick update. How long is this? I don't know how long this is. It's a not quick update, but I haven't made a video in a long time, so I'm hoping to at least do Will radios on a regular basis. Okay, well, I hope you all are doing well, and take care, and here's to a hopefully great 2026. Bye-bye.